Hello everybody, this is Post-Production Pie with srlounge.com. Welcome to another weekly constructive critique. This is where you guys go to srlounge.com, click on our forums link right here, which will take you over to this page. You're going to click in the constructive critique section, which is then going to go to this page. And all of you are going to be good enough to read our constructive critique rules before participating, just so we make sure you're all sharing the love and following friendly etiquette. All right, so let's get started. Now, forgive me if my voice sounds a little bit hoarse. It's because I'm getting over a really bad cold, which is also why you haven't seen me posting very many new videos lately, because I don't think you guys wanted to hear me when I sounded terribly ill. All right, so here we go. Let's go on to our first image. This is Lightbulb by Brian. Now, this was shot, let's see, on a D700 2470 2.8 at 70 millimeters at f6.3, 1/250th of a second at ISO 500. Now, here is the image, and I guess, let's see here. Let me see get a context for this. He's working with a new model and some poses, end of a session. Let's see, teaching the model a bit about lighting effects and stuff. So it looks like you guys are kind of just using this OmniSource light right here to kind of play around with the light. And it's really cool, but I guess from a shot perspective or from a viewer's perspective, I kind of want to know the context of this image. I guess I'm missing the story of what it is that's being done here. I kind of see this cool one light effect with this Omni light, but I don't really kind of understand what's going on. The pose and kind of the way that she's looking into the camera and the lighting doesn't necessarily tell me that it's supposed to be a like boudoir shoot where it's kind of sexy and revealing, kind of like that. It kind of reminds me more of like a, well, almost like campfire lighting. And the reason why is because the light source is placed below her face. And so we get this kind of uplighting effect on the light on our face. And you can see the shadow going up towards the eye. This is what I refer to as campfire lighting, where you kind of create that, you know, that ghost story look where you're telling ghost stories and stuff like that. Not exactly a flattering look if you're going for portraiture and stuff like that, because it's going to just create unflattering shadows. So I guess that's the main thing. I think it's cool that you're playing around with the light. I think it's great what you've done here. And I say keep playing around and keep experimenting. This is how you learn. But when you're coming with a shot, kind of think of what it is that you're trying to achieve. If she's in her underwear and she's kind of going for this nice sexy pose, I would use a light that's flattering to that. If this is meant to be kind of like a spooky shot, maybe her dressed up in like kind of like a, you know, like a cape with a cowl on it, where she's kind of hooded and looking down towards the light source as she's walking through a corridor, might better fit the overall kind of scene and the mood of the image. That way we're sort of matching the story with the actual lighting and the techniques that are used to create it. All right, but great job. We're going to go on to the next one. This is Blue Eyes, submitted by Ice Heat. Now, this is a photo of a 14-year-old girl. Let's see, really basic setup, D90 with 18-55, kit lens and no flash. This is at f8, exposure time is 1/30th of a second, 55mm focal length, and ISO 320. Post-process in Lightroom 4 and Photoshop CS5. Now, as far as the image itself, I'm actually very impressed that you're able to get an image this sharp at 1/30th of a second at 55mm focal length, because there's what we refer to as a reciprocal rule. It's a rule of thumb that basically whatever your focal length is, you're supposed to be shooting at least of a shutter speed as fast as that reciprocal. Okay, so i.e. if you're at 55mm, then your shutter speed should at least be 1/55th of a second, or the nearest closest thing would be 1/60th of a second. Now, so that being said, it's impressive that you got a shot that's this sharp. We'd have to actually look at the full version to see how sharp it is, but it looks good. I really dig the way it's been processed. I love the eyes. I love everything about this shot. I think her eyes might be a tad bit bright around the whites, but that's really it. And the only reason why I say that is because it stands off quite a bit from her skin tones. Now, the face is a bit overexposed, but you know what? This is an actual technique that's frequently used to make skin look softer. So you'll often see this types of exposure in, say, fashion or kind of beauty portraiture and stuff like that. So I wouldn't worry so much about that because it really fits. And overall, I dig the overall look to the image. The hair, the tones of the hair, and kind of everything blends together. If you notice, we have kind of this golden tone throughout the entire image with the exception of her eyes. So we have this really nice strong color toning going on where her skin and her hair kind of matches this color tone, and the eyes is what pops with that blue, and it creates a really nice sense of contrast as well as a uniform look to the overall image. The two things that I would change is this. Once again, go back to the eyes, go for a slightly more natural look. Right now they look like they're a little bit too strong as far as the work that was done on them. I'd also crop in to kind of cut out this right side. And the reason being is that we know that areas of bright highlights draw a lot of attention, and so the only thing competing for attention with their eyes and with the skin is this bright area off to the right side. And we also see some blue tones here, which, since everything else in the image kind of matches this golden hue except for the eyes are going to draw attention, and this blue over here is going to draw attention, okay, or purple over there. All right, so hopefully that helps out. Great shot. Let's go on to the next image. Now this is by mbridge87. Here's looking at you, kid. Let's see, the metadata is ISO 100, f4, 1/200 of a second, using a Sigma 7200 at 2.8. We don't know what camera this was taken on, but this looks really nice. It's a great image, and I like what you've done with the post-production. It has a nice pop and a good feel to it. I'd probably say that you don't really need to use a vignette on this kind of close-up image because it sort of vignettes the beak a little bit, which, you know, you don't really need. But overall, it's great. I think it's a little bit disturbing that this bird has a kind of a tumor thing growing there. I'm sure it's just the bird, but that kind of does look tumorish. It's not a tumor. I'm just kidding, guys. So it looks really good. I dig the overall colors, everything about it. There's not really too much else to say about it other than just maybe lose the vignette, and I'd probably go with a framing that's a little bit more kind of unique and interesting. So maybe placing the eye over that third line and leaving a little bit more negative space off to this right side so we can have a little more, I don't know, kind of context into what is this bird is facing essentially. Even if it's just more water, I think you'll find that it adds a lot of extra interest to the image, having a bit of negative space on the right side. All right, great job. Let's go on to the next image. This is from Lee. It's an experimental car shoot. He says he wanted been doing this for a while, thought it'd be kind of a cool shot, and one that he hasn't seen too often before. If I got into something creative and had a much higher quality image, I think I might even be able to market it. This was a 15-second exposure at 75 miles per hour. That's really fast. And it was shot at f10, ISO 200, 14 millimeters. Let's look at this image full size so we can actually see close up. Now, when taking these kind of shots, I've seen a lot of these shots in, like, say, car magazines when they're advertising these cars or whatever it is that they're going for. And there's a few different key things that we're looking for. Number one, we're looking for a lot of detail and sharpness within the interior of the car, with great lighting, with great kind of just creating a great look to the overall features and components in the car. So oftentimes they're lighting from the sides, which really serves to kind of edge light and bring out the texture of all these different objects in the car. They're also shooting at a very fast shutter speed inside the car, at least to the point where everything looks sharp. So I see a lot of ghosting over here on our person, and you can even see where he's moving his elbow in and out. We can see ghosting where basically you can see this shifter behind his arm, because basically he's moving his arm in and out as he's shifting or whatever he's doing, and so we can see these objects behind him. So you want to go for a faster shutter speed, or at least be using a lighting technique that would allow us to freeze him and then be able to bring a lot of beautiful edge detail to our kind of dashboard and fixtures there. Then on the outside of the car, that's when you want to incorporate the shutter blur, or the shutter drag, to get that blur effect in the lines. But generally you don't want to go longer than, say, 1 to 3 seconds. And more often than not, when you see shots like this, they're going to be composites, where they're essentially shooting the interior of the car in one shot with that lighting, and then they drag the shutter, drive at a slow speed. Like, you only need to go, like, say 10 miles an hour, drag the shutter 1 to 3 seconds, and then you get the outside look of what basically the lines on the road and everything like that are going to look like. So that's kind of how you can get this to a point where it's going to have a little bit more marketability to it. Really adding in those details and making sure the shot is perfect, adding in that extra production value essentially. But it's a great job as far as an experiment, and I'd encourage you to keep with it. So keep it up. All right, let's go on to this one. This is Kevin Collins, experimenting with product photography. Let's see here. We have a white backdrop, 2 lights positioned on each side and overhead, looking for suggestions on composition, lighting, and processing. This was shot on a D3100 on a Nikkor 85mm f1.8 at 85 millimeters at 1/130th of a second shutter and aperture of f6.3 at ISO 100. Okay, so here's the main thing that I notice when I see this image. It's great that it's on a white background. It makes it very easy to cut out, makes it very easy to use in sort of an advertising use. But since we're doing a shot of products, we want to basically use a type of lighting that's going to bring out the design and the features and components of that product. Now, what I would probably do is stand up this watch so it's standing straight, basically, and you're shooting directly into it. That way we can read all the dials, we can see everything there. And I would use probably a multiple light setup, but we need to flag the light and we need to light this watch in a way that's going to bring out all of the edge detail. And again, we're talking about lighting specular objects, and so you're going to be using a lot of flags, a lot of small lights, and a lot of things to essentially shape the light and the shadow of this watch so you can bring out those lines. So as far as an experiment with shooting products, I think it's a great job with that. But if we're going for that advertising look, we need just a little bit more in the setup of the lighting to make sure that we're bringing out all those edge details. And you can check out, we have quite a few posts from other photographers on the forum where they've been shooting like bottles and things like that. The lighting setup is going to be very similar, where you're basically using multiple lights. You're going to be using flags to block light, to create shadows, and basically create that look from there. So that's what I would say as far as that goes. The overall post-production, there's nothing wrong with it. When you're going for this type of product photography, generally everything like these little tiny scratches and little details are going to be photoshopped out of that shot because we want that product to look absolutely flawless. All right, so that's it for there. Great job, Kevin. Let's go on to the next image. This is from AnnMyth88. And this is D Sisters Brennizer portrait, shot on a 50mm 1.8 at the same park about an hour or so apart. Thoughts? All right. So both these images are really cool, but what I find makes these images cool right now is really the effect itself. And this isn't to say that they're not great images. I think they're a great job, and I think if you shot these for, senior portraits and stuff like that, these people would dig it. But from a viewer's perspective, the main point of interest here is really the actual effect being used in the Brennizer method in creating that uber shallow depth of field. What I like is when you incorporate these types of techniques to basically add interest to an already interesting photo to begin with. And so while the background is pretty interesting, I'm finding that the composition itself is a little bit lacking. We're not quite symmetrical. We're not quite using a rule of thirds. We're not quite using negative space. We're kind of in between all of these. This background is really cool, but what might have been even cooler is if she was actually sitting on the grass, maybe on a blanket, and you use these branches to actually frame her into the shot, getting a little bit lower. The other thing too is that from the photographer's perspective, it looks like the photographer's shooting quite a bit higher than the subject. And this is going to create that effect of basically the subject's legs looking very short, and our subjects are going to have this kind of almost, very short dwarf-like, I don't know what the technical term is. They kind of look very, very short, like little human dwarfs or something, all right? Which isn't a flattering look. So generally want to get down lower so that it's shooting from around the hip to chest height to not create that effect. Okay, we see the same thing with this one. She looks a little bit taller, but still that top-down look. And it gets exaggerated, by the way, with techniques like the Brennizer method, because you're essentially shooting all around the subject, and when you compose them and put them together, those types of distortion related effects are going to be amplified. Okay, so again, the same thing here. I dig where you're going with it, but there's a lot of things that we can be doing to add interest in these shots, including, say, color matching, coming up with better compositions, figuring out what the story is in each of these shots that we're trying to tell, basically, and then using that effect, using the Brennizer method to add to the overall scene as opposed to basing the scene around a technique. All right, hopefully that helps out. By the way, the lighting is really nice and the production is nice as well on these, so good job there. Let's go on to the next one. This is Self-Portrait at the Office by Pepe124. This was using 2 speed lights, 1 CTO gelled inside the radiator on the left, 1 CTO gelled bounced off the LCD monitor on the right, and of course the desk lamp to light the mug. Let's see here. This is actually a really cool shot. I dig it. I think we're losing quite a bit of sharpness and detail just from this forum post, but I like it. It tells a story of this person working. It kind of reminds me of what is it? Law and Order. They have, I forgot which one it is. I think it's the Law and Order Miami, but the DP on that uses almost this exact setup for every scene where you have strong tungsten lights lighting up our subjects, our people. So we have like lots of oranges in the foreground, and then he uses lots of blues and stuff in the background. It kind of reminds me of that look. But overall, it fits and it works well. I think there's a little bit of added production value that we could add to this image by doing certain things, like small little things to add a little bit of extra light. But granted that this is just kind of a self-portrait, you're just having fun with your gels, I think it's a great job. But there are a couple things we can do, and one is basically adding some sort of hair or rim light to separate your head from the background of your chair. We can also be adding a little bit more light outside to kind of brighten it up a little bit and just add a little more interest. And I would probably pull down the light on these files because those files are basically so bright and because the color is very strong, they're drawing a lot of attention. And I kind of want my attention to go into the center, into his face, and even like the cool red tie that he's wearing, as opposed to this red object over here that's drawing a lot of that kind of attention away. All right. Other than that, I think it's a cool shot. I like that you're getting creative with your self-portraits in the office. So I dig it. All right. Great job. Let's go on to the next one. We have here First Pics of Baby Henry. This is by Jeremy Davis. And this was shot at a 50mm wide open at f1.2 on a 7D at 1/200 of a second, 1600 ISO. I think this is a great shot of something that's going to be used in this baby's album. The parents might put together a nice little album showing some portraits, showing some different things. And this is a beautiful detail shot of these feet. I love it shot at 1.2. I might raise it just a bit to say 2.0 just to give me a little bit of extra sharpness on the toes while not creating so much of a glow effect around with the... and you can also bump clarity a little bit up just to kind of reduce that glow effect on the blanket a bit. But overall, I dig it. It's a really nice detail shot, so good job there. Let's go on to Sunrise. This is by Christoph. Christoph's a frequent poster and been out a while with a bad case of... I know, it seems to be going around, dude. I had it too. So this was taken on a day that he was brave enough to get up before sunrise. There's not a lot of days that I feel brave enough to get up before sunrise. This was shot at f32. No idea what he was thinking. It's totally fine. f32 is going to give you... Well, the reason you're getting that flare effect is because you're at f32. Unless you happen to Photoshop that. But that doesn't look Photoshopped to me. So I dig the shot. I think this is the one thing that, getting up in the morning in these types of locations gives you a type of look to these shots that you just can't get any other time of day. By the afternoon, within a few hours of the sun's rising, it's going to burn off all this fog on the grass and you don't get that look anymore. So I love that look. It adds a lot of interest. I love this flare, how it kind of drops in the center of the frame. I think it's a really great shot overall, and I dig the way that you produce it, so it kind of all has this same really nice warmth and yellow tone to it. The only thing that could really make this image any better is kind of the presence of a little bit more of a subject in the scene, maybe even having a little bit of foreground framing to kind of add a little bit of interest. But again, not every landscape needs that, and I think this holds really just fine on its own, and it's really great to look at. So good job there. The one thing I'd probably Photoshop out is this little lonesome cloud up here. He's kind of just chilling all by himself, and same with this one over here. I'd probably clone out these objects because they're such bright objects and they're such strong highlights that they draw attention away from the sun, where we want the sun to essentially pull us into that bright point in the sky and then drop us right in the center of the frame. Instead, my eyes kind of go up and they get caught in this cloud up here, which doesn't really add much interest to the shot. So I'd probably clone it out and just use more of this subtle graduation in tone in that place, as well as right here on the right side too, to kind of make it a little more even. Other than that, that's it. I think it's a great job overall. So great job, Christoph. And let's go on to the next shot. This is from McJolie, Putting My Head Up High. Shot on a T1i 50mm lens with an aperture of f1.8 at ISO 100, shutter speed 1/500th of a second, focal length 50mm. Now I dig this shot. I think there's a couple things that you could do to make it even more interesting. Now, one of the things that when in looking at the shot, I love the look of the model. I love her pose. I love the hair. It just, everything about it works, okay? But the thing to me that doesn't quite work is that she's in the dark area of this image and we're surrounded by highlights. And we know that highlights draw a lot of attention from, the viewer. So rather than kind of focusing on this center area where it's a little more dark, I find myself actually looking out towards the edges because my eyes are naturally drawn to these highlight positions. Okay, so that's kind of one thing there. I'd probably frame or use some sort of technique, whether we want to flag the light or whether we want to do something just to drop that tone down so that our subject really pops from the image and she becomes the emphasis, as opposed to almost like it almost feels like the background is the main subject and she's just standing there kind of in the way of it at the moment. The other thing is I'd probably smooth out the textures on the skin, smooth out the lighting a bit in post-production, and then bring out the additional texture in her hair, because it looks like right now there's a little bit too much clarity being brought out in the image, which is creating a sense of, well, a very grungy look to the image. And if that's what you're going for, that's totally fine. But I would like to kind of make my skin on my models look smooth, make them look amazing, bring out the texture in the hair and the clothing, and then in the background rather than in their skin. So hopefully that helps, McJolie. Great job with the shot and keep it up. Let's go on to our last image. This is by Hilly330, another frequenter on the forum. And this is a really cool shot. Let's check this out. This is Beach Walk with Daughter. Appreciate the usual feedback. Let's see, composition editing. Not sure 100% if I like the fact she's looking out of the picture. Perhaps it makes it feel less set up. You know, I mean, general composition rules, as you know, Dave, is to have her looking in towards the space of the frame. But again, I don't really find anything wrong with this. The only thing that I think, you know, basically from a compositional standpoint, the only thing that would make it more interesting to me in following her gaze is that I feel like the water and this background on the right side would have been more interesting than this kind of the little shacks and the sand over here on the left side. That's kind of for me, and you know, you don't always have to follow these rules of, you know, you're shooting into the area that they're looking and stuff like that. But in this kind of situation, I feel like that right side would have been a little bit more interesting to look at for the viewer than what we see on the left side. But as is, it's a great shot. I like the composition. I like everything about it. I like the effects and the toning that you've put on it. It really adds a lot to the overall just cold mood of the day. I mean, it looks like it's absolutely freezing out there, which I don't know why you'd be going for walks on the beach when it's freezing cold. It doesn't make any sense unless you're going ice fishing or something. I don't know. But I dig the overall look. The post-production style that you applied really well fits the overall scene and kind of the mood of the shot. I like really everything else about it. So the only other thing is that the shacks, because they do have a lot of different colors in them, they are going to draw quite a bit of attention because everything else is sort of muted, but then we have this varying colors over here, which creates contrast, and that contrast is going to draw viewers' attention. So I would probably say I would drop the vibrance a little bit in this area, or again, you know, shoot the shot where she's on the left side and then you're opening up to the right side where we don't see those kind of distractions. But I do kind of find the sand and the pebbles kind of cool too. So take it for what you will, man, for a grain of sand or for a grain of pebble. Actually, pebbles don't come in grains. They come in full sizes. All right. Well, that's it for this little episode, guys. I hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you guys in the next Constructive Critique.